Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And today, my guest is Stephen Shortt, and Stephen is from Successful Succession. And if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, you can see his URL, which is successfulsuccession.com. Stephen is an expert at family business transitions, which is what my new book is about. So I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation. So let's bring Stephen in and start it. Hey, Stephen, how are you today?
Hey, how are you? You well?
I'm well, thank you. How about you? I'm going to bet you are too.
Well, the sun is shining here in Dublin, so life is good.
Okay, that's good. It's humid here in Vermont, and I hate humid, but that's besides the point. So let's talk about family succession. Um, family succession is different than just selling a business to a third party. Uh,
Yeah, there's an immense amount of baggage that goes along with it. So when you have grown up in a family business like I have, I've grown up in two family businesses. The kitchen table and the boardroom table are the same piece of furniture. So there is an awful lot of baggage that goes along with everything to do with transitioning, with moving, pivoting, changing, and how different people evolve.
so, what kind of differences or what things, if I'm going to sell the business to my family, and I'm a big fan of selling, not giving, by the way. So,
I
um,
bought both of mine.
Yeah, I think it's a really bad idea to give the business to your kids. I think if you sell it to them, then they get some value behind it. If I'm going to sell the business to my kids, what do I need to be looking at that's different than if I'm going to sell my business to either my managers or to an outsider?
Well, I guess there's probably, if you're selling it to an outsider or your managers, you're probably going to stay on in some capacity in an advisory role or some kind of overlap period of time. And it's much easier for us then to actually go, right, well, we are over the next 6 months, 3 years, whatever. 2 years is really the max that I'd say, but some people might stay on for three. You start to step back, and because it's a different person, it's a different entity. Uh, it's easier for the entrepreneur, especially if it's the founding entrepreneur, to step back from their baby. When it's family, you don't get that 2 year window. That's you're always around, because at Christmas in 2 years time or 3 years time, you're going to be sitting down and going, how's that client, or that person rang me? Why are you not bending over backwards for that client that I brought in 40 years ago? Because they're annoying and they waste all of our resources. So and all of that baggage that goes along with it, and that it's a really important mindset that the current generation has to have to hand over the baton to the next generation.
So I have a piece of advice I always give selling owners, departing owners. And I don't care who's the next owner of the business. They're essentially going to hate pretty much everything they do.
Yep.
Um, and with family, they still have the opportunity to tell the kids they hate what they're doing.
Without feeling guilty, because from if you're talking to somebody who you have a professional relationship with, you can kind of go, yeah, I'm not so sure about that, but it's cleaner. Whereas with a kid, you're always going to see your kid as that kid who you had to help when they grazed their knee, when they fell off their bike when they were 3 years old. So there's always going to be that instinct.
Or what I find a lot of times is the parent still is keeping baggage around of when their kid was 8 or 9 years old, and they forget they're now 35 and a completely different person, and
Yeah.
maybe even have a different way of looking at things.
So this is it's a really interesting thing, especially when you see families who don't spend a lot of time together. It happens a lot more in the States, where one person would live on one coast, for example, and one person would live on another coast, and they'd only meet 2 or 3 times a year for family, for Thanksgiving or things like that. It's amazing how quickly we regress back to our childhood, and we actually start to take on that persona. We could be running a very successful business on the other side of the country, but when we're back in that environment, in our family home, with those dynamics and those routines, we immediately start to regress into that. And that can actually be very difficult psychologically for the current generation to hand over to the next generation, because the kid does need to step up a little bit.
Yeah, I actually have two experiences with a family transition. One is I bought a business for my father, and he was a royal pain in the neck. I could say something else. During the 20 years I owned the
I'm Irish.
business.
I've heard it all.
I'm sure you have, but we like to keep this clean for our friends at Apple.
Okay.
Um, and he was a royal pain in the neck. I mean, he would come out, had opinions about every darn thing I did. And then finally, after 20 years, I sold the business. I was 44 years old, went into the wealth management business and then consulting. And during the 20 years he was alive that I was running that business, he literally had nothing to say as far as what I should be doing. Whereas he drove me crazy because he understood the industry. And when he didn't understand the industry, he didn't say a thing. That might be one of the reasons kids don't want to go into the family business.
Yeah. So this is in the keynote that I give. I mean, there's a couple of mindsets that I want people to go away with, and the first one is this idea, and you've encapsulated it really beautifully here. If we think of any story in the history of stories, it's called. There's a book called the Hero of a Thousand Faces. So the most well-known story in the world across all cultures is the hero's journey. So there's a process to this where somebody sets off and they have the status quo. Then they either meet somebody or they find a gubbin, and then they go into what's called a special world. And that's where all the change happens. They come back as a different person. So if we take it that every entrepreneur is the hero in their own hero's journey, it gets to a point where they, first of all, they need this mentor or sage person. And when they come full circle, the next generation is then going on their hero's journey. So we as entrepreneurs, we need to go from the heroes of our own journey to the mentors of the next generation's journey. And that is a real mindset shift in helping them to succeed in their journey. It's not our journey anymore.
Or, which is what I really like doing a lot these days, is they should hire an outsider to be the guide for the rising generation. And I actually find that to be a much better thing. One of the things in fact, I have a meeting later today about this, is it's what I call the leapfrog manager, where we bring a manager in who is a senior manager, will become the president of the company, the COO, president of the company. And their main job is to train the rising generation to be an adult and able to take over the business. And at some point when mom or dad moves on, then we do a leapfrog where the rising generation now becomes the CEO and the boss of the COO. And it's often a much better transition because they don't have the family baggage that their parents bring. I hate having parents be managers of their children. Worst thing that you can ever do. It's not the worst thing, but it's one of the worst things you can do.
So I would push back on that a little bit. That I think if we can get the mindset right, and if we can actually get a lot of the onus is on the current generation to actually shift their thinking to do what's best for the next generation, because they're doing what's best for the business as a whole. But part of it is the changing from hero to mentor and becoming that somewhat impartial person, because at the end of the day, the parents are going to have the best interests of the business and the kid. It's just how they go about doing that. Because the other thing that we need to get the current generation to understand is what got the current generation here is not going to get the next generation there. So things are going to have to change. Things are going to have to adapt. And the skill set and the experiences that the current generation have is exactly what brought them to where they are today. But it's not necessarily what's going to bring the next generation forward. So they need to be able to let go of some of that and understand that what they're giving is not going to be held necessarily as canon.
Yeah, that really comes into an area of skill that most business owners never really learn very well, and that's how to delegate effectively.
Yeah.
And my experience is if you're a good delegator to start off with, and you actually do let people do the work after you send it to them, and you're not a helicopter manager, meaning that you're looking over the shoulder every 5 seconds, you're likely to have a better transition than the business owner who still is in control of everything, is not a good delegator. In my experience, they are terrible at making that transition. And frankly, that's where most of the family business transitions are, at least in the US, is with small companies, not with big companies. Big companies pretty much have it down. They know how to do the succession issue because they've done it with a whole host of managers. You got 25 people. Mom or dad has never been anything but the hero, and they don't know how to be the guide. And
Yeah.
frankly, when you're a great delegator, you've made yourself the guide and not the hero, and you've learned to lead from the back. So in my experience, this is just my experience,
Yeah.
it's very, very difficult for parents in smaller businesses under 50 people to make that transition to their children where they're going to be an effective mentor or guide. They just don't
So
have it in their DNA.
so that's where I would suggest that somebody like me or an external consultant, as you mentioned, would come in to actually help them to build that framework and to build those routines and those rhythms. Because sometimes it's actually just identifying, because people are, and this comes back to identity versus reputation, like how we see ourselves, not necessarily how other people see us. The age old thing of we judge ourselves by our intentions, we judge others by our actions, but we don't actually acknowledge that other people are judging us by our actual actions, not by our intentions. And sometimes having that and doing some personality work and doing some dynamic cultural work can really help illuminate that for the current generation and get them to see the benefit of changing some of their habits.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I have many coaching calls a week that are on that very, very particular topic where we start talking about, hey, well, first we have to get the child to start acting like an owner, not like an employee.
Mm-hmm.
That usually takes a couple of years. And then we need to get the parents to understand the child is going to do it differently. It may be better, it may be worse, but it's going to be different. And most likely it's going to be better because their mindset is different. They're not clawing for the first dollar.
So it's going to be better, but from the current generation's point of view, it's going to be worse because it's not exactly the same way that I would do it. So it's
Yes.
therefore not correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's something that children need to do, at least in my experience, to get their parents to let go. And that thing is they need to show true appreciation for what their parents have created. And if they don't do that, the parents are just never going to let go. And until you do that, there's never a transition. Is that your experience?
So yeah, when I took over my first family business, there was a lot of tension, and because I was trying to move things probably quicker than they were comfortable moving things and going in a more digital way and using more technology to be able to run the business more efficiently. But it was releasing a lot of the micromanaging side of things, which was bottlenecking us a little bit. And there was a lot of tension in that until I came to that point of actually sitting down, as you say, with my folks and go, look, what you've built is amazing. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do these things if this business wasn't here. Like I wouldn't be able to grow the business from this point. I'd have had to grow it from the beginning. So I really do appreciate it. But this is the next evolution. This is the next chapter, and it has to be done this way. Otherwise, it's all going to come crashing down because the market has changed, and what got you here is not going to get the rest of us there. So we need to evolve this. Then when it came time to convincing my folks that it was time to sell that business, that was another thing of letting go. So why don't we do this? Because for them, I mean, they had blood, sweat, and tears for decades put into this, and I had blood, sweat, and tears for less decades, but a long time still. But when we actually had these conversations and we're really objectively looking at things, we could see, look, this is the best decision for us as a family. It's the best decision for the team to be able to join a bigger team and sell to somebody who's in a bigger consortium, so they can actually have more benefit rather than us trying to reinvent that wheel.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense to me. The amount of trepidation I had when I sat down with my father and said it's time to sell the business was unbelievable. Now, the good news was he saw the same things I did and saw the same reasons for selling that I saw. So we didn't have any conversation about being the right thing. There was no question for both of us it was the right thing. But still, sitting down with somebody who had built the business from scratch, went in at 6 o'clock in the morning, filled orders, went out and filled machines, came back and did all the stuff that you have to do to start a business, which is really, really, really hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them that what they've created is not viable anymore and we need to do something about it. was a really difficult place to be. And frankly, I mean, you had the same experience. I think everybody has that experience if you get to the point where you need to sell the business. And unfortunately, that happens a lot.
But unfortunately, I would argue that it doesn't happen often enough. And I think that there are people who get trapped in this cycle of they go into the four things you can really do with a business. You can stop it and it just goes away when the founder dies or the current generation decides we're not doing it anymore. You can sell it, which is fine. Or you can survive, which is essentially, to me, just a prolonged stop, because you install somebody or you keep doing things the same way as they've always been. The market is changing around you, and it's just a really slow, painful death until it's no longer in your hands and the bank or somebody else comes in and shuts down your baby and you have no control over it. So that's why I'm most interested in the fourth one, which is scale, which is actually putting the right people in the right place to scale the business up.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, most people I know who are working as outside consultants, that's their, let's build this, what I call an economically and personally sustainable business. Let's build that. And then we can decide what we want to do, because then we build something of value and we have options. If we haven't built a sustainable business, which is essentially a business somebody else would want to own, we really don't have a lot of options of what we can do with the business.
But also a business that somebody else can own, that it doesn't require you coming into the office every day.
That's where the concept of passive ownership or operational irrelevance, and I can't come up with a good term for it.
You mentioned I really like the idea of it, but it's it needs
people don't want to be irrelevant in their company. That's the truth. And they like once I explained to them what operational relevance means, and all that simply is you're not involved in the day-to-day operation of your company at all. You're only doing strategic activities, and you have a team that's running the company. They love that idea.
Yeah. So something like ivory tower management or something like that. So
yeah, it's just, again,
anyway, there's negative connotations.
Yeah, I'm going to probably end up using passive ownership, because that doesn't seem to offend that many people. At least any more than I normally offend people.
Well, I mean, look, again, I'm Irish, so we could get into this, but you want to keep this in Apple, so we'll stop there. Actually, this is one of the things that I actually love about family businesses, is that you can have these really, really offloading, very quick conversation. Now, you can have a lot of baggage and the stuff that happened to you when you pulled your sister's hair at 16 years of age and she hates you for it. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen which is irrelevant to the business. But at the same time, family businesses have this ability to actually have it out with each other, have a flare up, and actually move on with things very, very quickly.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen.
If the family is not dysfunctional, the truth is, a lot of times these flare ups happen with where the kids or the parents, mostly it's the kids, especially with today's kids. And I'm not dumping on millennials, so let's not go there. They can't let it go. And if they can't let it go, then they can't be in the business. I mean, it's really that simple. And it's fine for them to go off and do something else. And parents need to stop trying to make their kids or guilt their kids or bribe their kids into working in the family business when they can't even have a civil conversation at Thanksgiving or Christmas or any other holiday.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at least that's been my experience over the years.
So one of the things that I think for family businesses, and it ties in a little bit to the what got you here won't get them there, that it's not always the best idea to have the next generation join the family business. For me, the better way of looking at it is, how can we help the family business to join the next generation? So what do we need to change? What levers, what minor changes do we need to make now to go, okay, well, so my daughter has this type of personality and these type of interests, which could feed into this part of the business, not the business part of the business that I'm spending most of my time in, but there's another part of the business, and we can actually help our children to be entrepreneurial with a head start. They have this family business, they have this basis, but the business changes to fit them, as opposed to them changing to fit the business and ending up being miserable and having problems in 10 years' time.
Yeah, I was talking to the head of the Family Firm Institute a couple of years ago, and I was asking her about, how many family businesses there actually are in the world and how many get transferred. And the research that FFI uses all the time is about 50 years old. So I said, maybe you should
Yeah,
bring that up to
Kellogg's
date a
one.
little bit.
Yeah.
But she said something that was really important, I think. She said, we no longer think of family businesses. We think of families in business. And that means that the family business may not be the centerpiece of the family. It might be you have one business, another child has another child has another business. And we've been lucky enough to have enough resources to help these kids start their businesses. That's where the concept of a family bank comes from, which is a pot of money that families use to start businesses and buy houses and do education for kids. Now, typically, these are very successful families that do this, but still in all, it's families in business, not a family business. And if the family business fits in to the portfolio, then it should stay.
Hmm. I like that concept, actually. I hadn't heard that. Not family business, it's families in business. I like that idea, actually.
I find that often you're better off sending a child off to start their own business and try to force them into a business they have no interest in.
So this is in old Ireland. We had back in the Celts, like pre-BC, back in the BC times. We had a concept in Ireland called fosterage, where a clan, the next generation of the clan members, would go and actually live in another clan, a friendly clan, not a warring clan. They would go and live in a friendly clan for about 3 or 4 years, and the other clan would be responsible for training that young person in the ways of their clan, also the ways of Celt law, music, sewing, farming, all of the things that they needed to do before they returned to their original clan to take up leadership positions within their organization. So I know a lot of family businesses, some of the bigger ones, the ones that have more structure that you were talking about, they would say, if you want to come in at a senior level, you have to have achieved that senior level elsewhere to come in. You can't just roll out of bed one morning and go, right, I'm going to be the VP of marketing now because I have a Twitter account. Because that's just going to be horrendous. So but a lot of smaller businesses, a lot of smaller family businesses, they do feel that they're defaulted to that. They go, well, I need to give something for my son because he can't get a job anywhere else. So I have to bring him into the business, and I have to bring him in senior or something like that without actually having him learn the ropes and start from the bottom to work his way up.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I call that having a family business constitution, where
Yeah.
where you have rules before you join the family business. Here are the rules, and you gave up one of them. If you're a janitor at your outside company you're working at, you started our company as a janitor.
Yeah.
If you're the CEO of an outside company, it's about the same size, but you can come in the CEO here, but you can't come in as a CEO if you're a janitor.
Yeah.
So that's there. Stephen, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there because we are out of time. And, I find this with a lot with people who are good at what they do. Best practices are pretty much all the same, and you're showing all the best practices. So I'm assuming there are people who are listening who are going to want to find you or talk to you. And how would they go about doing that?
Easiest way is to go to successfulsuccession.com. So I'm Stephen Shortt from Successful Succession. So that's all the S's that you could possibly want in branding. So my email, Stephen@successfulsuccession.com, and there's a contact form on the website. More than happy to have a chat with people and jump on a call.
And I have two things I'd like you to do. The first is I want you to go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest rating and review. It's really important. And the more reviews we get, the easier it is for people to find us. And the easier people to find us, the more people listen, and we get the word out better, which is what the whole purpose of this podcast is. And the second thing is my second book has just been published. It's called The Sale Ready Company. In fact, we have talked about almost half the themes in the book we talked about today, because this book is a business parable. It's about a business family who is getting ready for the senior business owner to transition out. And we have a dysfunctional son who shouldn't be there in the first place. We have a daughter who's green. We have a manager who's in place. And you get to learn about what all these characters do along the way to help the owner, John Aardvark, get ready for retirement. So go to www.sailreadycompany.com and you get the book there for free plus shipping, which means you pay me $7.95. We ship you the book. I'll even sign it. And we have a free resource center with 9 or 10 pieces of content in there, which will tell you specifically how to do the things that we talk about in the book. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Stephen Shortt. We're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.